Hello, greetings from the Mosel. Thank you for watching today. We are talking today about the own root vines, ungrafted vines. This is a word or terminology which appears more often nowadays. Own root or ungrafted, what is that? It all has to do with the phylloxera. Phylloxera is a little louse that originates from North America. And it's a little animal that was brought over to Europe from America with the North Atlantic trade in the 19th century. And the louse migrated from the ports of Europe into the wine regions and devastated viticulture in most parts of Europe dramatically. Viticulture was about to go entirely down because of the phylloxera. It was a catastrophe like we have never seen in Europe before in any century. And that's why people really had to find a solution how to solve this problem. And the phylloxera louse has a little sting on its head, which it drills into the roots. And as it is doing this, the roots start to build little calluses. And the callus starts to squeeze the central cylinder where the zap flow happens, squeezes it together, and the vines die off. Now, at the end of the 19th century, middle to end, there were some very intelligent people that said, if the louse comes from America and there are native vines in America, why does this louse not harm the American vines? Well, it's because the American vines, their roots, don't build a callus, they build a stronger, harder tissue that the louse, the phylloxera louse, cannot penetrate, and so it is not harming the vine at all. And that's why these American vines, wild vines, can live with the phylloxera louse. So people said, why don't we take American wood with the roots and we put European vinifera, so-called vinifera wood, the grape vine wood to produce wines, why don't we graft this on an American rootstock? Why don't we combine the two? Then we have a phylloxera resistant or at least tolerant vine that brings grapes just like we know it from Europe, Chardonnay, Riesling, Pinot Noir, and so on. Well, they did this, they tried it out, and it really worked. They knew about grafting from the fruit production, especially apple trees, and it worked out well. And in the meantime, people have breeded and crossed new rootstock varieties that are used for different soils, whether it is for chalkier soil, heavier soil, soil with more or less water supply. And today we can use these rootstocks with its different characters to improve certain situations in certain soils, but also to balance out negative impacts of the soil on the vine. So it has become a tool. Still today there are people who say, if we still had ungrafted vines, so-called own root vines that are not grafted, then we would have a much more homogeneous plant, because rootstocks tend to grow either faster or lesser than the sign wood, the European wood that is grafted on top. So you have different vigorosity, and that can disturb the vine in its growth here and there. Also, you always have the cut of the grafting, so the veins in the little canals in the channels in the vine, they have to overcome this cut and they have to make a bend and so on. So it's not as homogeneous as an own root vine. Some people say, I prefer the own root vines. Now, it is not allowed to plant own root vines because people are afraid, the government is afraid that such a catastrophe like in the 19th century could happen again. And that's why they decided to prohibit own root vines. Well, there might still be people who plant them, but there are, of course, still people who have old vines from pre-phylloxera times, parcels that have been planted even after phylloxera, still with own root vines, because maybe in those days, in war times or whatever, there were no American rootstocks to use. And those own root vines still exist today, and a lot of people say this homogeneous one-piece vinifera vine, these vines bring much better wine. It's something that I agree with, but it is something hard to prove. You would have to compare wines and you would have to make your own opinion about it. But I think it's very worth it to talk about it, to explain you the difference between own root vines and grafted vines. And it's part of our history, of our viticultural history here in Europe. And I hope I could tell you some interesting things about this, and I hope I could give you some more information, and you have something to look up maybe in the internet or in wine books. And wish you good fun with that. So I hope you're going to join us again in the next podcast. And I say greetings from the Mosel. Bye-bye.